Welcome back to another mentoring moment with Dr. Mo. I'm Dr. Mo, and in this mentoring moment, we will elevate and enhance your tapping practice by taking a deep dive into working with stubborn SUDs. So in this video, I'm going to be going over my top 5 reasons for why stubborn SUDs can rear their ugly heads during a session, and of course, how you can best work with them when they do. So let's dive right into reason number 1. So my first reason for why SUDs may not be dropping is that the event that you have identified is actually a tabletop. It may be too general. So even though you may be thinking that you have indeed stumbled upon a specific event, you may actually be tapping on a tabletop. So this can affect your session in various ways. One of which is the overall event SUD will not decrease because it's really hard to affect change when you tap on a tabletop issue. Okay, so it can not only affect your overall event SUD, but it can affect the SUDs of the things that you identify as aspects, which in this case, because if your event that you've identified is actually a tabletop, the aspects that you identify could be one of two things, or a combination of both. They could either be tabletops themselves, general issues themselves, or they could be table legs. So if you've identified as this specific event being this tabletop, what then could happen is that the aspects that you identify could possibly be table legs, which is a great thing because you've identified specific events. But what's not so great is that because you have this idea that they are aspects, you will not go deeper into unpacking them more than simply tapping on the event in a very general manner, if that makes sense. Okay, so first reason why your SUDs may not be decreasing is that your event that you've identified is actually not a specific event, but rather a general tabletop issue. And this then leads to aspects that are not really aspects, okay? So moving on to reason number 2. So the first reason was about your specific event not being specific enough, right? Being too general. And reason number 2 is maybe there is a lack of specificity on aspects. So this can manifest in several ways. So if you find that your overall event SUD is not decreasing, this could mean that there are partially untapped aspects, or this could mean that there are aspects that you have not yet uncovered, right? There are these hidden aspects that are lingering kind of in the background that you and your client have yet to identify, but are still contributing to emotional intensity or overall intensity of the event. Because we know that aspects are the fundamental building blocks of events. So if there's partially tapped aspects, or there are new and novel aspects that you and your client have not yet identified, those things can be contributing to the overall intensity of the event, right? Because those aspects still have intensity. So the thing you want to make sure is that you're getting specific as you can with your aspects, but you're also hunting for as many aspects as you possibly can, right? So let's take the first example. Let's say you have identified an aspect, and it's a visual aspect of seeing a yellow raincoat. And you've been tapping on this aspect and it just won't seem to decrease past a 4. So what you can ask your client is that, what exactly are you focusing on that visual aspect? Is it the color? Is it the stitching? Is there something else that you're focusing on visually that is drawing you in? Because sometimes, yes, we've identified an aspect, but maybe that aspect is not specific enough, right? So maybe there's something on that raincoat that is contributing to some intensity. And once you can bring that conscious awareness and your client can describe it in their own words, that's really when the intensity will go down. Okay, so that's one way that you can get specific with aspects. The other way is that, say you've tapped on all the aspects are 0 that you could possibly have identified, but the overall event SUD is still, lingering at like a 3. Okay, so you're like, well, if aspects are the fundamental building blocks of events, then maybe there's some hidden aspects that I haven't accounted for, right? So this is where testing methods are really great. So you can ask your client to really tune into that specific event, making all of the sensory experiences bigger, brighter, more intense, really amplify everything, make it more expansive, exaggerate everything so that your client will likely be able to tune into novel aspects, novel sensory aspects that they hadn't been able to do before. Okay. So that is reason number 2 on why, your stubborn SUDs may not be coming down, and it has to do with aspects. So number 3 is kind of piggybacking off of this aspect idea, but it's kind of specific to when you're working with emotional aspects, okay? And I call this ballooning out of emotional aspects. So if you are tapping on an emotional aspect, and they won't seem to go down, right? Those emotional aspects might be ballooning out. And sometimes when you tap on emotional aspects, it can inadvertently tune your client into their whole emotional ocean rather than just one water droplet. And I use this metaphor of ocean and water droplet in my most recent video, which I will link in the description box below, so you can check that out for more context. But what essentially I mean by this is that emotions can become general very, very quickly, including emotional aspects. So you may be tapping on an emotional aspect for a one-time event, and you've been really, really good about getting specific, but tapping on that emotion can actually, quickly tune your client in to all the other times where they have felt that same flavor of emotion, right? And this is normal, and this happens often because emotions are kind of this invisible thread that connects us to different experiences in our life. And sometimes it can be really hard to just focus on the emotional intensity for just one experience, right? Without tuning into all the other times where you have felt this emotion. And sometimes this can be very unconscious. The client may not even know that they are doing that. But if you find that, the SUDs for this emotion are really not decreasing, this is what might be happening. So then you can ask your client, I know you may have experienced this emotion many other times in your life, but really focusing on this one time, can you tell me how intense it feels just for this one time, right? So with your questions, you can anchor your client in to just that one time. But another thing that you can try is to follow the intensity breadcrumbs, as I always say. So if you find that this emotion is not decreasing, you can ask, is there something else that's coming up for you that kind of has this same flavor, or you've experienced this before? Or is there a better example of when you have experienced this emotion than this event? Okay. So once you ask those questions and open the door for your client to tune into what may be coming up for them, the intensity for that event could potentially decrease, because what you will likely do is go backward and go to another, or not backward, you could go, forward, sideways, whatever. You could go in another direction is what I'm saying, because you're just following the intensity. So emotional aspects that don't tend to go down could either be connecting you to another experience, connecting your client to other experiences where they felt the same thing. And so it's really hard for them to be able to differentiate. So your questioning skills are going to come in handy a lot for this one. So my next tip is that why SUDs may not be decreasing is that there might be some secondary gain or psychological reversal at play. So if you find that the SUDs are not dropping for an event or even an aspect, what could be happening is that there might be some unconscious resistance to change or resolution or fully clearing whatever it is that you're working on with your client, right? And really want to hone in on this unconscious, right? It's an unconscious desire to keep this for some reason, okay? This issue for some reason. So this may make sense to the client, or may make no sense at all to the client. So secondary gain is kind of a very complex issue to begin with, but what you can do to explore this, if you feel that maybe it's operating within your client session, is you can ask your client, what might be preventing you from having this event, this aspect go to zero? What might be standing in the way from there being no intensity left, right? In this way, asking this very open-ended question and being genuinely curious about what's happening, you can allow your client to kind of have a more introspective experience and have a more honest conversation with themselves, wondering, what's the reason why? What's preventing me from really collapsing this? What would it take? Basically you're asking, like, what would it take for this to have to go away, right? Well, then your client might respond, well, I really actually don't want to let go of this anger because I actually feel empowered by it. Or if I clear this event, I won't have a reason to be upset anymore, right? So there's a lot of flavors of how secondary gain can manifest, but asking that question, what's preventing you from this going to a zero intensity, can actually open up the conversation and allow for cognitive shifts or more awareness to happen. Okay. And the last reason is that excuse me, simply put, your client may need more time under tapping. Okay, they may just need more than 2 rounds on a certain aspect or a certain event. Or they could potentially benefit from some different type of stimulation to their nervous system, meaning that if you've been doing, the basic recipe as it is, maybe spice it up by doing the 9 gamut, or maybe do the long version of the basic recipe where you include the finger points every time, or maybe try tapping on alternate tapping points like the sore spot or the liver spot or the wrist points, or other extra points, which if you're interested, I have detailed in my ebook, The Basic Recipe Unpacked. So I not only do the basic recipe, but I give you some options for extra tapping points as well. Okay, so similarly to that, maybe your client's nervous system just needs time to integrate all of this. Maybe it's an integration factor, because sometimes it takes a while for those changes that have already been made to be reflected in the SUDs, okay? So you can work with this by slowing the session down and allowing for more space, just making the session more expansive by doing tools like echo meditation or box breathing or any other somatic tools that can create more expansiveness within the session, create more space, and then you can check in on those SUDs again and see if there's anything different. Okay. And of course, I had to include a bonus tip for y'all. So this is kind of something that you may already do, but it's kind of underrated, right? So creating and ensuring that your client has an optimal tapping environment and experience. And this can mean simple things like making sure that they have water, they're staying hydrated. Sometimes SUDs don't go down because clients are not nourishing their bodies, nourishing their nervous system. Maybe your client is really fatigued, right? And that's a reason why SUDs may not go down. Or, and this is something that I've experienced personally as a client, but also with my private clients in my private practice, is this issue of privacy, right? So if your client is in an environment that is not so private, they don't feel quite comfortable, it may be harder to access their feelings, their emotions, and really tune in and go deep. So that could be a factor that is contributing to these SUDs that just won't go down, right? So for instance, if your client is working on an issue with their family, but they're in a house with their family divided by a wall, it might make them a bit more resistant to going deeper. And this could be completely unconscious, or it could be something that they tell you, but it's something to consider, right? So just kind of being curious about your client's environment, if there are any environmental factors contributing to the SUDs, and also ensuring that their experience of tapping helps them achieve the most optimal result. Okay? So those are all of my reasons for why SUDs might not be dropping. So I hope you have enjoyed this mentoring moment and you learned a lot. And I hope you can drop those SUDs like they're hot. All right. If you have any questions or anything like that, please comment below. I'll be happy to help you out. And I'm Dr. Mo, and we will talk and tap soon, okay? Bye.